Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, a few interesting news updates, and we have some trade rumors involving the Sharks, Flames, Red Wings, and the Edmonton Oilers. We'll go to all the updates from our past couple of days coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below, don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. So as usual, we'll start with a couple of signings from our past couple of days. Only 4 signings to talk about as of today, so not a whole bunch here to talk about. We're going to start off with a player who avoided arbitration, and that was Chicago Blackhawks goaltender Arvid Soderblom. Soderblom, who's been a backup over the past couple of years to Mrazek. There's most likely going to be a backup this upcoming season, fight with Laurent Brossoit for that position. He's 25 years old, he's a goaltender, he gets a 2-year contract extension, AAV of $2.75 million, which was a massive upgrade from his previous contract. Soderblom this past year played in the most games he's ever played at the NHL level, also had the best stats he's ever had at the NHL level, putting up a 3.18 GAA, 898 save percentage in 36 games with Chicago, after he had a 3.92 GAA and 880 save percentage in 32 games the year prior. So Soderblom's coming off one of his better seasons. He looks like he's going to be a solid backup 1B sort of goaltender, can play like 30 to 40 games and put up some decent point totals. Like, I think if he can continue to develop and continue to get better, he could eventually get to like under 3.00 GA and like a plus 905 save percentage. Like, I think he has that sort of potential. So I think 2 years of 2.75 mil, not a bad deal. If it's not working out, they can walk away from him in 2 years or trade him next off season. If it does work out, it could be a really solid pickup here to have their backup tonight. So a very interesting pickup here from the Chicago Blackhawks as they signed Soderblom. Then we saw the St. Louis Blues also make a signing on Saturday, and that was with RFA forward Nikita Alexandrov, who's a center left wing prospect, 24 years old, has gone through some NHL time over the past couple seasons, but has been mostly AHL level player, gets a 1-year league minimum deal with the St. Louis Blues, so very interesting note there. Alexandrov had some opportunities at the NHL level a couple of years ago. Last year, only playing the AHL, putting up 21 goals and 49 points in 48 AHL games, was really good at the AHL level, was called up on occasions but never got into any NHL action. The year prior had 7 games played and 7 points at the AHL level, and also had 2 assists in 23 NHL games. So after a couple of seasons having some stints in NHL level last year, it was a little bit of a step back, but he dominated in the AHL. So I definitely think that he will probably challenge for a bomb six role this upcoming season for St. Louis, and it's not a bad contract there. 1-year league minimum for a young player who's a call-up option, not a bad deal there for the Blues. Then we saw the Buffalo Sabres avoid arbitration with Connor Timmins. In our last video, we talked about how Timmins and the Sabres were not close on an extension, but they have come to terms. The right shot defenseman who was acquired this offseason from the Pittsburgh Penguins gets a 2-year contract extension, AAV of $2.2 million. That's definitely a little bit much in my opinion for Timmins. Timmins is a good guy, don't get me wrong, but I'm just not sure if he's a $2 million plus player. He's a guy who can play 6-7 minutes, has had a lot of injury troubles over the past couple of seasons. This past year plays most at the NHL level in a single season, playing 68 games with the Penguins and Leafs combined, having 3 goals and 15 points. So it wasn't a bad season there from Timmins. That was also a career high in points for him. So not a bad season there from Timmins. And if he can continue on that trajectory, I definitely do think Timmins could be a solid third pair defenseman. He's a right shot guy, which the Sabres don't have a lot of. And I think if they do run into some injuries, he's going to be the first guy to be put into the lineup. I think he'll probably be more of a spare guy to start the season, just given how deep that Sabres defensive core is. But I think eventually Timmins could get some opportunities, so very interesting note there. And then we also saw another ARB case get avoided, and that was in Montreal, as the Canadiens have signed James Struble, who's a left shot defenseman, 23 years old, to a 2-year contract extension, AAV of $1.413 million. So an interesting signing there from the Habs. Struble has second stint at the NHL level this past season, putting up 2 goals and 13 points in 56 games after he had 3 goals and 10 points in 56 games the year prior. Has been mostly an AHL level player. So I think he could be a solid third pair guy. Maybe eventually could be a second pair guy, but at this point in time, more of a third pair guy. So under $1.5 million for 2 years for a young defenseman who can play third pair minutes, that's a great deal in my opinion for the Montreal Canadiens. And they avoid arbitration. So very interesting signings from our past couple of days as Struble, Timmins, and Soderblom all avoid arbitration, and RFA Alexandrov gets a new deal with St. Louis. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to those other pieces of news. So when it comes to the other pieces of news, there's some very interesting ones here. We saw 4 players who are UFAs sign overseas. 3 of them not too surprising, one of them definitely a little bit. So the 3 players who weren't too surprising: Luke Phillip, who's been an AHL player over the past couple of years, had a couple of NHL stints, signs in the SHL. Portalowski, same thing, more of an AHL level guy, has had a couple of NHL stints, signs in the KHL. And then Alex True, mostly an AHL level guy, couple of NHL stints, signs in Liga. So True, Portalowski, and Phillip all sign new deals overseas and will all continue their careers over in the KHL, SHL, and Liga. So very interesting note there. Also, former Capitals star Nick Backstrom, who's been dealing with, I think it was hip injuries over the past couple seasons, has barely gone into NHL action over the past 2 years, has basically been out due to injuries, has contract to expire this year. He was a UFA. The Caps didn't bring him back. No surprise there given his injuries. He's actually signed in the SHL. So it looks like Backstrom will be trying to make a comeback after all of his hip problems. It doesn't sound like he'll be coming back to the NHL anytime soon, but it looks like he'll try and continue on with his hockey career in the SHL. So very interesting note there. But Nick Backstrom is heading over to the SHL, while Portalowski, Phillip, and True all also head overseas. So very interesting note there. We also heard the updates when it comes to Dylan Samberg's arbitration case. Samberg and the Winnipeg Jets are nearing their arbitration date. So they have exchanged numbers. It sounds like Samberg has elected to be a 1-year deal, so it'll lead him straight to UFA status. Samberg wants $6 million, and the Jets want $2.5 million on a new deal. So I definitely think Samberg is way out of proportion here. Like, Samberg's a good defenseman, but I think he's more of a $3 to $4 million guy. I don't think he's anywhere close to being a $6 million defenseman. I do think, however, the Jets are maybe a little more closer. So we know that the middle is probably somewhere where the arbitrator, if they do wind up going to arbitration, would wind up giving his contract. So it'll probably be like a 1-year deal, like $4 to $4.5 million, which I think might still be a little bit too much for Samberg. So we shall wait and see on that. But with Samberg's arbitration hearing coming up, Samberg and the Jets have trade numbers, and while the Jets want to sign him to a $2.5 million deal, Samberg apparently wants $6. So very interesting note there. And lastly, Carter Mazur, who missed the past couple of months due to an injury, was on injury reserve. Missed the last few weeks of the season for the Detroit Red Wings, has officially been activated off of injury reserve. So it's really great news there for Detroit. Mazur is one of their top 4 prospects, so it's really great to see that Mazur has been activated off of injury reserve, and good to see that he'll be able to get back into game action for the Detroit Red Wings when training camp comes around. So very interesting note there, but those are all the updates on our past couple of days as Phil, Portalowski, Backstrom, and True all signed overseas. Samberg and the Jets have traded their ARB numbers, and Mazur was activated off of injury reserve by the Detroit Red Wings. And lastly, here going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, we got a couple of things to talk about here. So in today's video, we're going to start off with the San Jose Sharks. According to the fourthperiod.com, Mario Ferraro has not officially requested to be dealt out of San Jose, but he is open to a fresh change of scenery. We know that Ferraro, entering the final year of his deal, he's got a $3.25 million cap. It has been mentioned quite a bit over the past number of seasons in trade talks. I personally do think there's a very good chance he'll get dealt. If not at some point over the next month or two, then at some point closer to the trade deadline. I don't believe San Jose is going to be a playoff team this year, so I definitely think they'll still consider moving some of their pending UFAs, and Ferraro's a guy who I think could bring them a really good haul. With the Sharks still not competing at this point in time, I can see why Ferraro would want to change the scenery. Like, he's a really solid top 4 defensive-minded defenseman, but at this point, he's probably the Sharks' best defenseman, and at this point, the Sharks aren't really a good team. So I think if he was to be dealt to a team where he could play consistent second pair minutes, defensive-minded guy, and could really help a team, I could definitely see that happen. So I definitely think there's a really good chance we could see a Mario Ferraro trade at some point in the near future. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that. But the fourthperiod.com does say that while Ferraro has not asked for a trade, he's open to a change of scenery if the Sharks were willing to move him. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Daniel Austin. He was talking about the Calgary Flames, just looking at their defensive group. And he wonders if Daniel Miromanov, the young defender on the Calgary Flames defensive core, is maybe an odd odd man out in Calgary. Now, the Flames didn't do very much adding or subtracting this offseason, basically kept their entire group from last year around. But after signing Hanley with a very likely chance that Kevin Ball makes the NHL roster this year, as well as guys like Kuznetsov and Poirier potentially challenging for NHL roster spots in training camp, Austin does wonder if the Flames could try and move Miromanov if he's the odd man out. Like, you have Uyghur, you have Anderson if he's not moved by that time, you have Hanley, Pakal, you have Perek, who's about to become an NHL level player. You also have younger guys like Kuznetsov and Poirier who are going to challenge for an NHL roster spot. So the Flames will have a decent amount of really solid defensemen. So I could see why they would consider moving Miromanov. I think he's got 1 or 2 years left. I think a $1.2 or $2.2 million AAV. It's not an overly egregious contract, and I think for any team who needs some more defensive help, who could use a 6'7" defenseman, they would definitely be calling on Calgary if Miromanov was available. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but Daniel Austin does wonder if Miromanov may be the odd man out in Calgary, and if they could look to move him in the very near future. Something I do think is a possibility given how many Flames blue liners they have in their system. So we'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Bob Duff, he was talking about the Detroit Red Wings, and he thinks that the Detroit Red Wings are not done with their blue line additions. He says that Detroit usually likes to carry 8 defensemen on the roster, maybe 13-4, but he says they usually like to carry 2 extra defensemen. And while they haven't had much movement this offseason when it comes to their defense, he wonders if they can maybe try and make one more addition, whether that be a smaller type addition to be like a 6'7" guy, maybe like a spare defenseman, or whether that be like a massive upgrade to try and improve their top 4. Like, we know the Red Wings have not made much movement. Hull, Sherratt, those 2 contracts are still a burden for that Detroit Red Wings team. You have Seider, who's doing really good. You have Edmondson, who started coming to his own last year. You also have Gustafsson, who hasn't done overly bad. And there's a couple of other decent defensemen on the Red Wings team. They also have a couple of really solid prospects like Wallander, like Sandin Pellikka, like Buim, like a couple of other those guys. So I definitely think there's a possibility that we could see the Red Wings, instead of maybe rushing a Buim, a Wallander, a Sandin Pellikka next year, they could try and make some sort of move. We've heard them be linked to a guy like Erik Karlsson. I do wonder about Rasmus Andersson. There are probably a couple of other guys that the Red Wings are having their eyes on. There's a lot of linkage between them and Keandre Miller before he was dealt to Carolina. Last year, there was a lot of talk about them getting Jacob Trouba before he got dealt to Anaheim in the season. So the Red Wings have been in and around a lot of defensemen trying to get some top 4 upgrades, but to this point they haven't. They could also try and get like a 6'7" guy, someone who can either be a spare or play third pair minutes. So that's another possibility there for the Red Wings. So we shall wait and see on that, but Bob Duff does think that the Red Wings may not be done trying to add to their blue line after not very much movement besides adding a guy like Jacob Bernard-Docker. And I would agree. I think if the Red Wings were to make 1 or 2 more moves before the actual season starts, it'd have to be on the blue line, and I think adding a top 4 defenseman still is a priority there for Detroit. So we shall wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Edmonton Oilers, David Pagnotta was recently talking about the Edmonton Oilers, and he says that the Oilers are continuing to look for a top 6 forward upgrade. Now, we know that the Oilers have made some very interesting forward group changes. They traded for Isaac Howard, they signed Andrew Mangiapane, who should be solid top 9 forwards this upcoming season, but they lost Evander Kane, they lost Corey Perry, they lost Jeff Skinner, they lost Victor Arvidsson. There's a couple other guys on that Oilers team who went to the Stanley Cup final last year who they lost in the forward group. So as much as adding Mangiapane and Howard to that forward group is really good for the Edmonton Oilers, they're still a lot weaker on the forward group than they were last year when they went to the Stanley Cup, and there's still some question as to whether Zach Hyman will be ready for training camp or not, and whether he could miss the potential of the start of the season. So with all that in mind, there's still potentiality out there. The Oilers do really want to try and upgrade their top 6. Now, their problem is their cap space. They have basically none. With a full 22 or 23 man roster, they're going to have about $200,000 in cap space. That's not going to be enough to add a solid, really good top 6 forward. So either they're going to have to move out even more money, whether that be Adam Henrique or someone on the defense like a Brett Kulak or Jake Wallman or someone. They would have to move out someone to try and acquire a top 6 forward. At this point in time, I'm not sure if the Oilers are really willing to do that. What they could try and do is maybe try and add a top 6 forward closer to trade deadline. Like maybe they only play with a 22-21 man roster, they accrue some cap space, and then maybe they try and go after that forward that they really want, that top 6 upgrade at the trade deadline. Like, I think that's a little bit more likely because of their cap situation at this point in time. But I can see why they would want a top 6 help. Like I said, after losing Kane, Perry, Skinner, and a couple of other guys, Arvidsson, like I don't think they were overly great players, but they really did round out that top 9. So with all those guys gone, like they're going to have a really big hole, even with the additions of Mangiapane and Howard. So keep an eye on the Edmonton Oilers. I don't think it'll happen in the very near future, but I definitely do think at some point in the season, especially maybe closer to the deadline, the Edmonton Oilers could try and pull a trigger to add a top 6 forward. So keep your eye on the Edmonton Oilers, as there's a potentiality of them still looking to try and upgrade their top 6. So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I left you guys thoughts. Do the Oilers trade for a top 6 forward? Do the Wings add on their blue line? Does Miromanov get dealt by Calgary? And could Ferraro be dealt as a change of scenery candidate? Definitely your thoughts on all of that, plus all of the updates and the signings from our past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and if you're listening, subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I've linked that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.